Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host, one of your hosts, David Straggy, and here we have another fantastic month for you, where we are starting our Anime August month, and we have a selection of films, and one of them, our friend Brandon will be telling us about. Brandon, why don't you tell us what the movie for tonight is all about?
Yes, well, I'm very pleased that we are diving into a genre that is very less traveled in our circles, as I think we've covered two from the anime genre, and none that are quite like this. Of course, I am talking about the film directed by Naoko Yamada, A Silent Voice. This film has a lot of wonderful qualities, being directed by a female anime director, which is a very rare breed indeed, and dealing with themes that we will be discussing throughout that are very well known. It is a film released in, what it was, I think 2016.
Yes.
As far as the plot, a young man is ostracized by his classmates after he bullies a deaf girl to the point where she moves away. Years later, he sets off on a path for redemption, which is a very oversimplified summary there, to say the least. But we will be getting into that as we go along. But let's go ahead into our first impressions. You know what? Why don't I start with Dave, because you're the least familiar with anime in general.
It's not that I'm unfamiliar. I'm unfamiliar with a lot of animation films and animation series that obviously I have no I had no idea how emotional some of these films could be, and for me. To me, growing up with cartoons, I guess I could say that anime isn't exactly cartoons because it's more of an art form. So,
right.
to me, when I think of an animation or an anime, however you want to describe this kind of a film, I think of my childhood. And I think some of the reasons why this genre is overlooked is because I grew up in the generation where there's a time to grow up and stop, stop living in a fantasy world and live in reality. So, but some animations that I have come across have actually been a little bit more poetic, especially now that I've been ushered into the anime world. So, this was my first time viewing this film, and actually, I thought it was impressive. There were a lot of colors. I thought the story was very emotional. Very, I mean, it brought a lot of what bullying was to light. I mean, not many films, animations actually dwell on the bullying, and this just so happened to be about a young girl who just didn't have the ability to hear, and the classmates were quite cruel, and but it's almost like a journey of sorts that the main character goes through, and I guess we'll get into that later. But for my first time viewing it, I did cry during a moment. I did shed a few tears. So that brought a few emotions to light, and I could definitely relate to to the victims, because I myself have been bullied before. Maybe not. I mean, of course, I fought back when I was a kid, but we were always taught not to. And I think the journey that this main character went on was quite a journey indeed, because he had a lot to overcome, because he'd done a lot of cruel things. And I think who suggested this film?
That would have been Katie asked for recommendations, and I gave her that as a recommendation.
Okay. Well, then
Brandon recommended it by proxy.
I thank you, Brandon, Katie, for suggesting this as a suggestion for this. For I quite enjoyed it. So, moving on.
Got a ton of votes. When we put and keep in mind, this is the first time we have actually put these up to a wider audience to vote to see which one. And this one really got overwhelming support vote-wise.
Right.
So it was very much like on top of the list. But Jake, what's your was this? Well, obviously this is not your first watch. I know that, but
well, and also, and let me just, if I have not made it clear already on this channel, I come from almost the opposite mindset of what Dave described, whereas I do see animation very much as a vibrant art form, and the whole "it's for kids" thing actually is somewhat offensive to me. So I just putting that out there.
Totally understandable. I get that a lot from other adults around me, and that's not saying that I'm not an adult. But whenever I bring up the subject of animation to like maybe family and friends, they look at me, "Are you nuts?"
Now, this particular one, and I guess we can go into more detail, but this could be one that probably could be watched with the family if you could get the kids to sit still, because it does have good messages, but it's more of an adult product, definitely. But this is one that I had a very long and storied road to getting to this film. This was actually my third viewing of the film. My third complete viewing, let's say that. The manga, which the movie and the manga were originally titled Koi no Katachi, which I think literally means the shape of voice. I know that's the alternate translation.
And that's what it says at the end of the end credits, the shape.
Which I found that kind of weird that they put that on the screen.
Yeah.
But, yeah. But the manga and the movie were both released here as a silent voice. And we actually have a couple copies of the manga. The manga was released in 7 volumes in 2015. And I think the American release was about a year later. And we actually had it in my library system. And I saw that and I was like, well, this looks interesting. Mm-hmm. And I read it. And I was like, holy crap, this is an awesome series. I love it. It was short. It was good. It was really, really impressive. And then I heard they were making a movie. I think they announced the movie about when the last volume of the manga came out. And I was like, okay, I got to see this. And then they did a big Fathom Events release here for like, what, a weekend? And I missed it. And I was so upset and I missed it. And then the film was submitted for Oscar consideration. It was out there, but it was no traction, no mention of a release of anything. When Septim and I did our video of anime that need an American release, I cited this film as needing a release. I still hadn't seen it at that point, but it was on YouTube. So I actually sat down and watched about 15 minutes on YouTube, but I didn't have the time to finish. And then they announced they were doing a re-release, another Fathom event. And this time I was there. So I got to see it in English on the big screen, along with the featurettes that came with it. And that's where I found out that the English dub actually features a deaf actress in the main character role. So more on that later. But I was like, this is really interesting. They talked with her in the featurette, and I learned some good stuff from that. But and then they finally announced the American release. And we watched it. I watched it to prep for our big best anime movie video, last month? So this was actually, strangely, my first time watching it in Japanese. So I'd actually seen the English dub twice on this one. So, and Brandon, you believe it or not, I like the English dub marginally better.
Oh, that is impressive.
Yes, that is weird, isn't it?
Did you ever find out if the Japanese actress was deaf who played her?
No, I don't think she is. Actually, she was part of that featurette too. And she was talking perfectly normally. So yeah, it's definitely not. But it is notable that this is one of the very, very, very few anime that even has a deaf character, let alone a central character. And it's fairly rare in general in movies. So that's notable in of itself. The themes that Dave mentioned about bullying are there. There's a handling of teen suicide. There's a lot of really weighty issues in the film and in the series, and it's really great, and it's yeah, it is one of my favorites. It didn't quite make my top 10 for that list, but it was up there.
Oh, it definitely made my top 10.
Yeah.
My experience with it was I had gained a greater and greater interest after hearing about it through the circles that I run in. And everybody's like, "This is the best film. It got robbed at the Oscars because it was such a good film. This is one of the best films of the year," and all of this. And
It was.
I couldn't get to it on either of the events that they showed it in theaters, and it did depress me. And I also didn't seem to see a physical release in sight. So I became very obsessed with trying to eventually see this film. And when they had the announcement for the physical release, I put money behind it right away.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wanted that as soon as I could get it. And then I didn't watch it at all for the longest time.
Yeah.
And I watched it.
Anyone who's seen your collection would think nothing of that.
Yeah, that's true. I have a little bit of a backlog. But then we had this list that we did for the channel, which was that top 10 anime movie list. And I realized that I had a ton. Oh, looking at another one, Red Turtle. I should have watched that one. Oh, well. I had a ton of anime movies that I had not even seen before, and several of them. Matter of fact, 2 of those are on this month's list. And both of those 2 made my top 10 list after seeing them. I do understand what you're talking about, Dave. I know that feeling. I know that thing that cartoons are for children.
Mm-hmm.
That was drummed into my head by my father and mother growing up. But I was able to branch out with it, with shows like The Simpsons, stuff like that, where I knew that there were themes that were much deeper than just childhood stuff. So I was able to eventually adapt and get into anime in the mid to late 90s.
Well, my thing, Japanese animation was always like on the edge of the horizon, but just beyond my reach, because I grew up in a Christian household. And a lot of the films that my mom subjected me to were, for the most part, Christian based. So a lot of the films I grew up with were feature films for family. But
I remember those.
There were some random Japanese animation, believe it or not, that she came across, like that Nutcracker Fantasy, that Nutcracker Fantasy she had taped for me once, and it just so happens to be that it's Russian and Japanese mixed together. I saw Unico through something my mom taped. Both of those I actually saw together on a taped VHS. So whenever I came across, and then I was actually in a group of people who played Magic the Gathering. We actually started a card game together, and they all watched Dragon Ball Z, and one of them, his name was David as well. He had the whole entire VHS collection of Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z. So we would every week watch
on VHS.
On VHS.
So an entire room or something?
He had every single volume from volume 1 to whatever on VHS. And we would watch an episode or two, and we'd watch the battles between Gohan and Goku, and of course Goku's high school years and all that jazz. So, but yeah, those were fun times. And during that period is when I started to like Japanese animation even more. And then they had that Sci-Fi Channel thing going on, the anime thing, and that's how I got into Akira. And what was that Lily Cat that Brandon found me the title. So yeah, got into a lot of those through there, but and I believe I got into Vampire Hunter D somehow. And so those are my anime limitations, and I wasn't really. All the animations were always just as much as the Disney, so I would choose regular films over the anime because some of them were just out of my price range. So,
yeah. For me, as I said, I mean, as has been brought up before, I was very familiar with bullying in school. I mean, when I was growing up, it was not out of the ordinary for some of the bullies in school to actually break bones of people just because they didn't like them, and they could get away with it without much repercussion. I actually saw one person get their arm snapped by one of the football team members back in the day. So I've seen some pretty merciless bullying in my time, and I got very good at hiding.
I didn't hide. I was bullied myself, and I know that growing up with a sister in the same school, sometimes I would hear rumors about her, and I would defend her, and I know that she would probably defend me or whatnot, but there were a lot of things that went on behind the school doors that I'm sure we could never tell our teachers because they would never believe us. But I know I got in a fight where when I was in sixth grade, finally I had enough from a bully, and he said something about my mom, and that was the end of it. But yeah, I mean, bullying really changed my life, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse, because eventually you learned how to either be a man and stick up for yourself, or just be subjected to unimaginable cruelty.
Or simply not just disappear, like Brandon was saying, which I think it's kind of the route that I kind of took.
Yeah, I was not very good at standing up at numbers of like 6 or 7 to 1. So I was not a good. I could probably see myself if I had just one person, but when you got 6 or 7 people, it's a lot to deal with. And speaking of that, let's get into that part of the movie where it,
Yeah.
it seems like it looks like it's just one guy, but it's not. You've got the class of kids, and this girl comes in, and she's deaf. They seem to accept her at first, but then they start getting annoyed at her. And it's not really even him throwing the first. It's actually, I believe it's the black-haired girl. I can't think of her name. You know the names, Jacob.
Naoko Ueno.
Yes.
Naoko?
Naoko Ueno. Yeah. And
Not-
yeah,
not-
Ueno is like the one who sits next to the main dude, Shoya, and she kind of sits catty corner to Shoko, and Shoko being the deaf girl, and she kind of at first seems helpful, but it becomes very clear very quickly that she feels like it's just a bother to deal with this girl, and it's like you find out it's implied in the movie, but it goes into depth in the manga that she's also in love with Shoya. So that's a big part of the issue why she
I
just
kind of figured
nasty.
kind of figured that that's where they were kind of going. She kind of ended up being like the third wheel, and you see that that kind of jealousy out of Naka Ueno later on, like when she sees him actually defending her when she took her ear things out. She was like, "Really? You're feeling sorry for this girl? What are you trying to do? Some kind of retribution or something like that? You know? I mean, uh, to me, I think this film is kind of about all of the different students because each and every one of them has individuality. In a sense, because these guys are all friends at first,
Yeah, you've got Shoya has his little posse. He's got Shimada and I don't remember the other kid's name, and they're a bunch of little snot-nosed punks. And then, of course, like I said, Ueno. And then you got Miki Kawai, who's like the class rep, the really kind of teacher's pet kind of girl. Very sweet, very kind, always.
Glasses.
But even she is very complicit in all the bullying. She doesn't really do it herself, but she smiles and laughs and kind of encourages it.
Which
And then you got that nasty piece of crap teacher who's just up in front of the class, just kids, calm down. Don't, just in that very pedantic tone, but doesn't do a damn thing to stop it. And then when it finally the crap hits the fan and the head of the school comes in and says, we have gotten a complaint from this girl's mother and we think she's being bullied, and the teacher throws Shoya under the bus and has everyone back it up. And it's like, yeah, no, that dude should have been fired and worse. It's just not teacher of the year, that's for sure.
definitely not. I mean, it didn't exactly show the teacher in a very good light, which makes me think that that maybe this was somewhat geared towards showing that school systems are not really paying attention to this type of bullying.
Well,
And they don't.
Well, I was going to say more just the idea that it can be more subtle and more systemic than just one kid picking on another kid, Yeah.
What do we think about Shoya's mother.
Oh, she's awesome.
Oh yeah, she's the cool mom that most people wish they.
She had almost all the characters had a much bigger role in the manga. They naturally had to pare it down for the movie, but she still got some really good scenes. But in the manga, she has a lot more to do, and she's pretty awesome. But the scene where she accidentally burns the money he paid for her, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I would have killed my mother. I seriously would have. That sounded like a lot of money.
It was a fair bit. I think it was the
It
amount
was
that
like
she basically paid for
one.
hearing aids. Which actually,
Yeah,
this is one thing I didn't really mention in my initial thing. But one reason why this one hits a little close to home to me, Dave and I were talking before we started on some of the different movies that do have issues with hearing loss and that sort of thing. And yeah, I have extremely poor hearing in my left ear. It's I don't think it's deaf, but it's extremely poor. And because of that, I've also had a oversensitivity to certain frequencies with my right ear. So I know it's like to be imbalanced hearing wise, and it's not fun. And but I've also in the past I had a hearing aid, and I didn't stick with it, partly because of lack of insurance, and partly because it was annoying as can be. So I feel for the girl, and I understand a little bit of her having to deal with that. But when they said that she had lost or were broken 8 hearing aids, I'm like
Oh yeah,
these little punks. They
Well, and
that is not cheap.
is what they are.
knowing
That
how
is not
much they
cheap.
are.
Yeah,
I mean,
that is not cheap.
1,700,000 yen, which
Mm.
it's to do simple math with it. It's more complex than that, but the simple conversion is just to move the decimal point 2
Mhm.
places over. So we're
Mhm.
looking at somewhere around $17,000.
Something like that.
You know, that's pretty impressive. Yep.
Mhm. I actually have a feeling it's
Man, that
probably
could have
more.
paid for part of my college tuition.
Yeah. Heck, that would have paid a big chunk of mine.
But that goes
yeah,
right to the beginning of the movie where it shows him years later, and he had sold all of his stuff, including his
Right.
futon, which in Japan they use a lot of them. Some of them use beds, but then a lot of them use this sort of bedding that they bed down on for the night, like a sleeping bag, but not really more of a mat that they roll up and roll out.
I was
He
noticing
sold
that
that.
he actually was living very simply.
Oh
Like
yeah, he sold everything. He was going to
he
kill
really
himself.
didn't have posters on his wall or anything when he was growing up, of course. I mean, he really didn't have much to his while he was this teenager to an adult kind of thing. That right there shows some of the way of living that Japanese teenagers might actually do, where they actually don't need all of this stuff that we seem to think we need, us Americans.
In his case, though, it had a lot less to do with culture and a lot more to do with the fact that he didn't really feel he deserved happiness. So he didn't really see the need to do that stuff.
I mean, shoot, the movie starts with him basically getting to the bridge and getting ready to jump off.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what, and something distracts him and keeps him from doing it. So so when we cut back to the mother after that initial flashback, of course she's right to be upset.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the scene where she goes like, "Why would you want to kill yourself?" and just like nonchalantly says. And I deal with a lot of that through my professional life. You know, I deal with upper teen suicide and things like that a lot. So it does strike home when you see something like that. like he looks to himself that there's really no way that he can redeem himself, and that he doesn't feel like he has the courage to do what he feels like he would need to do otherwise in living. That really killing himself was the easier way out.
Right. Well, and one thing just to clarify, after he gets basically de-scapegoated by the entire school, even his buds turn. I mean, Shimada turned on him like, oh man. I mean, that kid must have had. I don't know. I don't like Shimada. He's a jerk, but I mean, he completely turns on him, and it's so bad that when they get into middle school, Shimada goes around telling everyone, "Stay away from him. He's a bully," which, of course, is him being a very bad bully, but he's the one who gets the first punch in, and it sticks, and yeah, it just basically Ishida's entire middle school was pretty much hell.
Un-
So.
Another thing that I think that was interesting in this film was the fact that Shoya could not look people in the eye after he had fully realized the intensity that his bullying had on Shoko. I mean, it was to the extent where no one around him really mattered to him anymore. So that's why I think the animation had all those X's on the people. So
He didn't them either. So that was the other part. It's just as Jacob was saying, that I mean, he was basically used to being shunned right out the gate, no matter where he went. So why bother anymore?
Right. That was
because anytime he would try to, that was other guys' handiwork, really, doing that to him. And eventually, I mean, if you go years, basically, I mean, we're talking what, 6 years of because he was like 17 at the present day, and I think 11.
Now, was this the studio that you had mentioned that had something that happened?
Yeah.
The news.
Yeah, Annie.
Kill Annie. Yeah, I was going to talk about that later on, but if we
Okay.
wanted to do it, we can. But yeah, what was I going to say? But yeah, one of the cool parts is later in the film when. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and say, like, when he finally learns to accept.
Spoiler alert.
Well, yeah, we've already hit a few of those, but
Yeah, we've gotten to that point already.
when he finally learns to accept life, basically, and the X's come down, before you'd always heard these people talking, and they're always talking about him, and it's very bad, it's very negative, but you notice it's pretty much all in his voice. And then as soon as the X's come down, you hear a variety of voices, and it's all kind of just random, stupid high school stuff. It's like, yeah. So I thought that was a really fun moment, but and very effective to that. Yeah. So and then of course the main plot. Mostly we talked about what I think is covered in the first manga volume, and then they do a time jump, like you said, what about 6 years or whatever. And they're, to where he, back to the beginning where he is planned to do himself in and he doesn't. And part of I was always unclear about this, and it was actually kids setting off fireworks that distracted him at that moment. But I was always a little unclear. I think he went to meet Shoko before that was part of his final day sort of preparations. He had somehow been in possession with her communication notebook for all this time, and he wanted to give it back to her, I guess for a bit of closure or whatever. And seeing her again kind of triggers something that is probably the reason why he didn't go through with it. But then, of course, he decides he's got to maybe we can try again, sort of thing. And yeah, and that's where you meet her sister, who's very amusing.
Yeah, at first she plays it off that she's a boy.
Well, she is, so she just plays along with it.
She didn't say anything other than like, she's my girlfriend, so fuck off. So it was.
And he's like, oh, she likes him young, huh? Oh, I guess that's fine. But yeah, that was interesting. And of course, Yuzuru, the sister, has an obsession with photography, and she's always taking pictures. And when they finally reveal why she did, I thought that was great. But that was, for most of the time, you're just like, oh, she takes all these pictures, and she's really good at it. And she always got the camera. But
she takes pictures usually of dead things, though.
right.
That's something that's
kind of
apparent right off the bat.
Right. Well, it's like I say, when she finally reveals, she finally just tells her mother straight up. She's like,
and you might not like this particular similarity, but there was one other photographer in one other movie that you don't like that took pictures of dead things in that beautiful, or in that
American Beauty.
The American Beauty, the photographer there, he would actually take pictures of dead things, I think.
He had different motivations, though. He was a very pretentious artiste type character. She had deeper motivations, I feel like, at the end of the day.
Very specific one, and it's like I said, it was a great motivation. It's like she tells her mother, she's like, you come to find out that Shoya is not the only one dealing with suicidal thoughts. And Yuzuru tells her mother, I thought if I surrounded her by pictures of death, she wouldn't, or I thought if I showed her what death looks like, she wouldn't be so interested in it, or something to that effect. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good thought. It didn't work, but it was a good thought. But yeah, so and then you've got you get this sort of what's his face, Nagatsuka is this random dude that becomes Shoya's kind of best pal. He's a crazy little dude too.
Everyone has that fatter friend that they always tend to hang out with, and I think because of his outcastness, Shoya.
He'd get along with the dude from American Beauty.
You know what's weird is what the guy's hairstyle reminded me of. Grape juice from My Hero Academia.
Very different character, but I saw that too, and I was like, "Oh, that's unfortunate."
Very unfortunate.
Especially at the end when he gets the Hiller stash.
Yeah, well, he's also got that clown hair that's more reddish, isn't it?
That was more green.
Or green, right? Green. Yeah, green.
Yeah. And then you come to find out Shoya is actually still in the same class as Miki. And as he starts to open up a little more, they kind of reconnect. And then there's this dude, Mashiba, who's Miki's friend, and he kind of gets into the group. And then there's the one person, I think the one person from their class who had not been bullying Shoko, who actually had gone out of her way to learn sign language with her, Miyoko Sahara. And Miyoko was one who herself had suffered bullying at Ueno's hands. And turns out she and Ueno are now classmates at a design school. But Sahara comes back into the picture. And so you end up with this kind of conglomeration of friends who are all kind of weirdos and outcasts and very tenuously connected, but they're, there's a lot of different types of drama that they work through together, one at a time. And I thought that was kind of cool. That was another thing they went into a lot more with in the manga that they really pared down for the movie, which you kind of had to because they kind of went off into some tangents in the original material. But
Yeah.
it,
Especially when you
yeah,
have a lot more time to work with something.
exactly.
But I think they did pretty good. I mean,
Right.
especially when you talked about like the order of things. Of course, it took it like in chronological order. It sounds like with the manga. I never got to read the manga, but
Actually, it's almost the same order. It's just cut down.
because I mean, they start right off with the suicide attempt
Right.
in the movie. If you're saying like it actually goes in the chronological order in the manga before it gets to.
I cannot remember if they started with that scene or not. I can't remember. I do know that the flashback to the elementary school eats up most of the first volume, but I feel like it started with a brief present day scene. Yeah. I don't remember for sure. But anywho,
What
and
you didn't
then
read the entire manga before coming to this?
it's only 7 volumes. But and we've talked a little bit about Shoya's mother. Shoko's mother is also an interesting character. She's very
She's very rigid.
very rigid. And you can understand why. You can understand why she's so furious at Shoya and in particular, but also you come to realize that she's just protective more than anything. And she's really not a bad person. Um, she just, yeah, she's an interesting, both of them. And then you have Pedro and Maria. That was another thing. Shoya has a sister who has a Brazilian husband and a little girl, and they're almost used more as a joke in the film. They're barely in it, and that's almost the joke.
He's flexing in the they have him flexing in the when they're changing in the changing room as they go in. That's just kind of funny.
Soldier, that's the thing. He's only rarely there, but
Yeah.
and you never see the sister in full shot. You get like glimpses of her, but never the full. It's kind of weird. You see Maria all the time, but anyway, and I think that was part of their. I think having Maria in there was one of the ways they were trying to show that Choya would affect other people if he, couldn't get himself straight. Um, so it was interesting, but anyway, I kind of
Well,
hijacked the character section, didn't I? Where else?
why don't we move on? We've talked a little bit about plot and we've talked a little bit about characters. But the plot themes, I'm going to move a little bit in a different direction because we kind of moved directly into characters from plot anyway. So I'm going to move back into plot a little bit, which the themes, because there's really several themes in this. There's bullying, there's suicide, but there's also redemption. And in a society where we are very keen to believe that all crimes and all things are unforgivable, and that goes on all political ideologies.
Well, if
Oh no,
someone has to have a different political ideology than you, then yeah.
that's the thing is that there's well, even people within the same ideology, they're not very forgiving of each other if they do something in the past and it's like, well, sorry, the past marks you forever, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, how often do you hear about somebody, well, they did this 30 years ago? Well, they're evil and they'll always be evil because they did that. Or said something like that. So in this time, the theme of redemption is something I feel is even more important than ever. out of all of these types of things. Because, I mean, I remember talking to my wife a little bit about this, and she said, I have a hard time, even at the end, forgiving the main character because, to me, I felt like what he and his friends did was irredeemable. And I feel like that is a present theme in our society.
Mm-hmm.
Is there such a thing as redemption?
I believe that there.
I think personally, if the things he did to her, he did in high school. Yes.
In fact, it was grade school.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. In grade school, I don't think we can be expected to have quite as developed a moral sense. So something that you do in grade school shouldn't necessarily follow you, but there are exceptions, obviously. But I feel like had Shoya been older when he did those things, he would have been irredeemable. You know what I mean?
Like, you see, that's the other. I mean, Shoya might have appeared to be the leader of the group, but he seemed to be more of a follower. Even with the bullying, it almost seemed like he was willing to make friends with her until he noticed that all of his other friends were bullying her. And then he doubled down on it.
Right. And again, I think that was one of the things they were showing was kind of the compounding effect. I think all of them behaved more harshly because they thought that's what they needed to fit in. I don't think they did it because out of pure malice. I think they did it. Shoya did it because he saw that his friends were being little punks, and Ueno did it because Shoya did it, and Miki kind of went along because everyone else was doing it. And it's kind of, and it just kept cycling back on itself.
And when he didn't, and when he wasn't doing it anymore, more, that's what Nakeo, I believe that was her name, correct?
Naoka.
Naoka. Naoka, she ended up being at that cat's meow place.
Was it just me, or did when I first heard that name, I thought much worse things of it than it actually was?
I think they thought it was going to be something else.
What kind of place working at?
Well, yeah, that was kind of fun.
And she was trying to hide from them, saying they actually came. Oh, gee.
Yeah, because she was out handing out flyers and she didn't recognize them quickly enough, or him rather quickly enough. But yeah. No, I do think that the idea of the explorers of the redemption is very important. The idea of forgiveness. I found it a little problematic to consider redeeming a bully, especially someone who's bullying a little deaf girl and what have you. But I think the fact that she was so open-hearted and so willing to give him a shot worked a long way. It wasn't like he was trying to force himself on it, really. And like I said, just the fact that he was a dumb kid. I mean, there are people who continue to be bullies well into their 60s, 70s, 80s.
Oh man,
that's much more problematic to my mind than but yeah, and I think if he had crossed the line any further than he did, he came pretty dang close, and those hearing aids were sticking a toe over the line, but he could have done much worse, I think. So it's kind of a gray area, but they did a good job of presenting all all the sides, I think. And that's one of the reasons I like this. They did a good job of presenting all the viewpoints and
Yeah.
making them seem valid. Yeah.
So I had to wonder if some of the others really redeemed themselves in the end at all. Some of them
What's
did,
that?
because I feel like the insight was lost on a lot of the other characters. Some of the ones did get some insight as time went on. Like the class rep gained a little bit of insight after she had taken time to think about it. Like, okay, maybe I should have done better. And really, I think it was her guilt itself that made her then just go right back into blaming him again and trying to get everybody on her side.
Right. And
But
that was kind of a nasty pull that she did, trying to act like all innocent and yeah. But yeah, I don't think Eleno really got redeemed by the end. She was less hateful, but still.
or his well, she had a different reason than any of the other ones. The one that I felt was least redeemed was that other guy friend of his, the kind of cool-eyed guy who was spreading the rumors. I swear he got zero redemption one way or the other.
Oh no. He just kind of got left by the wayside. And I guess maybe that could be seen as wishful thinking on the part of the filmmakers, that the unrepentant bully gets left by the wayside. That would be nice.
There's always one that will not be moved to changing their ways.
And the other female character was, gosh, I can never remember the names. But the mean girl, essentially, she at least did. I mean, not necessarily a good reason, but I mean, as it said, she did like him, but she blamed the other girl for all the loss that she felt she had. Very egocentric way of thinking. It's all your fault that I didn't get the life I wanted.
Right.
So, whereas she herself, she didn't have to go along with everybody else. She could have stuck by him, but she chose not to at the end of the day. But yet she chose the girl as the scapegoat, and that, I think that anger just kept building over the years, as it's like to do.
Well, she liked Shoya, and the teacher, and again, this was the part, the teacher was a bastard. The teacher put her on the spot. He's like, Leno, wasn't Shoya the one doing all the bullying? Like, he basically made her, he didn't want to get his hands dirty. He made her push Shoya, under the bus. I could see why she would be so resentful for that. And that's what I'm saying. The movie did a good job of helping you understand everyone, even if you don't think that they deserve your pity or empathy. You at least understand why she was so angry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just the nature of how bullying can propagate itself in the first place.
Right.
I mean, people think to themselves, well, how is that even possible that they could do that sort of thing? Well, this is how.
It could never happen here sort of mentality.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to happen, and it's easy for it to keep building upon itself.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a very real subject, which is why it can provoke a lot of emotions.
Well, this had a very serious tone to it, and it was definitely, though it was slowly paced, I could tell that there was a lot of emotion that went behind making this animation. Um, I
I,
think I think we're led to believe that there is some kind of redemption, as we were talking about in the character of Shoyo, um, because he has a lot of flashbacks and regret. That's the word that we were kind of forgetting to mention, regret, because
Hmm.
he saw that he had done wrong and he was trying to figure out how to make amends in his own way, even though his friends were saying that's exactly what he was trying to do. And I know that he was trying to avoid going out with her, but he really did have feelings for um, Shoko. Deep down, they kind of grew, I think, and that's why he kind of went and saved her, and I think that's why there was that awkward moment after he had woken up. He went straight to the spot that they always had together, and he asked her to show him how to live.
So a couple of things to back up to there. There's a bridge that is Shoko's place. That there's a little river under it in Koi, and she always goes there to feed the fish. And Shoya kind of hits on this idea of kind of using that as a way to get to know her a little bit. He gets the nice bread and comes out and tries to be, and so a lot of the action takes place kind of around the bridge. Um, and then, of course, you have the thing of we didn't really, I don't think we really went into it explicitly, but Shoko herself attempts to take a flying leap at some point. And Shoya is the one who saves her and ends up in the hospital as the result. So, like you said, this was the following that. And that was a stroke of luck, really. That was a very much a stroke of luck. He had gone home because Yuzuru forgot her camera, which was kind of out of character that Yuzuru would forget her camera. But yeah, that was and one other notable thing on the bridge was where the moment where Shoko tries to tell him that she loves him. I think that was a pretty
that
big
was a
scene.
cute,
And
very
what's interesting is that they managed in both the English and the Japanese dub, they managed to make the same mistake and make it work. Yeah.
in both of them.
Yeah, because in the English she says something like "I love you," and he thinks she says "I love the moon." And in Japanese she says "ski," which means "I love you" or "I like you a lot." And he thinks she means "suki" with a soft T in the front, which is moon. And he's like, "Oh yeah, the moon. Yeah, it's very pretty." And it's like, okay. And I think he
Oh, she
willfully
likes
did
you
it to her.
a lot.
Yeah. So that was kind of her putting herself out there. And I don't think he intentionally got it wrong, but he probably subconsciously.
Well,
Yeah.
I believe it's the adolescence subject matter that we're talking about here. The not yet fully realizing the um, the what it
Didn't
means.
understand the ladies.
Relationship means. I mean, the telltale signs that a girl is interested in you.
Yeah.
We all kind of went through that kind of a phase in high school where we probably had friends that were girls that probably liked us more than we probably realized.
Yeah, and it would have been nice to
Telltale
know.
signs.
It would have been nice to know at the time, but that's
Instead,
how it goes.
we were we were too busy daydreaming about our crushes.
True.
I mean, one thing I thought about aspect-wise that I wanted to go over, and the one person who I thought probably would want to talk about this the most was not available. It's not available for comment today. Was the plot's slow movement?
Mhm.
And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing that a plot is slow in movement, but I know that this is a slow-moving movie.
Mhm.
Did either of you feel the pacing had any major issues with it?
It was slow, but with animation, especially when you're trying to turn it into a dubbed animation, sometimes in order to explain what's going on to slow thinking people, uh, who are slow to realizing what a story is all about, sometimes a story needs to be told slowly so that you can get the whole story as it's going.
I think I like I said, I saw this 3 times, and the third time, the most recent time, I admit I've been very tired. It's my own fault, but I've been very tired the last week. I found it slower than the first 2 times, but I think I think also honestly, I think the Japanese dub is even more restrained and more melancholic than the English dub, which enhances the idea that it's a slow paced film a little bit. Um, what I find interesting is that they did manage to take a 7-volume manga and turn it into a slightly over 2 hour movie without really losing anything major. And part of that was that they did manage to they cut off the side bits. They cut off the side stories, the diversions, the whatever. And that would have made a more lively film. It would have made a much busier film. And I think you would have felt the loss all the more because of it. Because in this one, you have time to really spend time, even though you still spend a lot of time with the characters, with the settings, with the story. I think the pacing worked pretty well for how they did it. It just because of the generally sad subject matter, that combined with the slow pacing will definitely mean there will be some people that can never get into this movie. I mean, that's just yeah. But along those lines, though, as far as the would this be a good point to launch into like the artistic and production aspects of it?
Yeah, I was thinking about doing that actually at this, which is really a lot of it's the really the art style,
Well,
because
the
from
art style, yeah, is gorgeous. Gorgeous
almost a
film.
watercolor look to it.
I almost thought that there was some Norman Rockwell buildings that they might have taken after when Shoku and Shoya were having special days together during the summer. Um, I believe that there were some structures that looked kind of Norman Rockwell-ish, kind of like House on the Rockish, kind of like that one colorful place that looked like some of it was on the ceiling,
Mhm.
and there was a building that they were on top of where he was sliding down. I believe that building looked kind of architecturally like a Norman Rockwell kind of a building. So I don't know whether he that kind of architecture had or held sway in this manga, uh, or what, but it kind of felt or looked like that kind of a style of
If my
architecture for me.
if my memory serves correctly, the art style of the manga was relatively simple and straightforward. The art style, the cover art, is very similar to what Brandon said, sort of a watercolorish feel, kind of. And the character designs are not dramatically different from the original designs. Um, it is worth noting, unfortunately, the character designer, Futoshi Nishio, was one of them killed in the Kyoto fire.
Here's
Um,
something.
more on that.
Was the manga colorful, or was it in black and white?
It's black and white, but like I said, the cover art is colorful.
Okay.
But the general art style was fairly simple and straightforward. But the studio behind this, it was Kyoto Animation, and Kyoto Animation, they make gorgeous productions. They are well known for their background, the painting, the in between animation, the location scouting,
What are some other
top notch
films?
studio.
What are some other films from this studio?
Well, most of the films have been more or less related to various shows they've done. The director, Naoko Yamada, also did the film for K-On! And she did the film Tamako Love Story, which was from Tamako Market. They also did the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, which was part of the Haruhi Suzumiya franchise. They've done a lot of great franchises, Clannad, Full Metal Panic, whole bunch of Lucky Star. Lucky Star is a more simplistic design, but
Actually, if you want one that will be a tearjerker, just watch the Clannad movie.
Oh yeah, Clannad movie is downright depressing, but the series, I'm one of those people that prefers After Story, but that's a divisive issue for a lot of people. But but definitely also, I know we're both big fans of K-On! And that was a fun movie. But one thing that I do want to mention with Yamada, Naoki Yamada is she is influenced by Western art and whatever. I don't know about Norman Rockwell necessarily, although that could be part of it. But this film kicks off with The Who's "My Generation," which
I was trying to figure out what older song that was.
That was a really fun way to kick off an anime, kind of a weird, random thing. But I had not realized this, but it's also fitting. I didn't realize Pete Townshend was deaf in one ear, or tone deaf at least in one ear. And I'm like, okay, well, that seems apropos.
Well, since we've moved on to music, what did you think about the rest of the soundtrack?
I liked it. There's parts where it gets really jazzy,
I know there was a lot of piano.
Yeah.
A lot of soft piano during the soundtrack. So
it's composed by Kensuke Ushio. There's a lot of soft piano. Like I said, a harder piano during the jazzier segments. But yeah. Oh, sorry.
Well, yeah, I agree. Though I thought the music was actually quite fun myself, and I did think that their choice for the opening song was really good, especially when you're going back to the flashback with the children as they are doing that.
Right. They kind of use that as sort of a montage, if you will.
In a sense, they kind of use it as the coming of age music, where it's like when they use it, that's when they go into the 6 years later, isn't that?
No, they use it in the opener.
Okay.
But yeah. And then you have the end theme. Yeah, it was nice. It wasn't my favorite end theme, but it was nice.
It was, yeah. I would have to go with that. it kind of went with the tone, but it wasn't what I was expecting since we had what it opened with. But
Now, let me double check one thing and see. No, never mind. I was going to see if it was Saori Hayama, but it wasn't.
Well, we're going to have some even more iconic themes as we go through the month.
Mm.
I mean, Summer Wars had a very good theme to it, and so did Your Name. And of
Oh,
course,
yeah, that
Totoro
one.
has one of the more recognizable themes, even to American audiences.
Yeah, it was spoofed in South Park, and I,
Exactly.
I love that. But at any
But
rate,
yeah, I think though overall, this is an excellent film, artistically speaking, both drawn wise, animation wise, and story wise. But as we start to wind down time wise, is there anything that anybody really feels like they should add in relation to this film?
I do want to go ahead and do. I did a very brief mention. I want to continue a little bit with this. Again, we have mentioned, Brandon and I have mentioned on our channel several times that there was that big fire at Kyoto Animation and arson. Jerk. That was, I mean, that was one of the worst attacks on art in I can't even. But
One of the terror attacks in Japanese history
yeah, I
since the
know.
war.
And as of right now, the death toll from this attack is 35 people in and around Kyoto Animation. Not all employees. Two of the released names were interns who were just there as students. But they've released 10 of the names, and 7 of them were involved directly in this film. Like I said, Futoshi Nishiya was the character designer and the chief animation director on the film. He was a big part of this film. Mikiko Watanabe did background art. Keisuke Okata was a production manager. Sachi Tsuda did painting. Ami Kuriki did key animation. Junichi Yuda did in between animation. And Yoshiji Kigami worked on the storyboard and key animation. So that is a big chunk of the people behind this film, not to mention all those others I mentioned. And I just, again, it's just a senseless act. And I just wanted to make sure I, at least mention those folks. They did leave some good stuff behind. So that is.
Well,
so,
I mean,
oh,
one
the
thing.
studio is now no longer because of this arson.
Oh,
I think
they
still
still are
wanted to.
recovering stuff. They even had an article not too long ago that they actually recovered a significant amount of data drives.
Right.
Including one of their things. Was it Velvet? The name Velvet something.
Violet Evergarden.
Violet Evergarden. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I need to see that. I've heard so much about it. But they have basically lost the building. They are the owner of the company has said straight up, we are not rebuilding that building. So I don't know what beyond that. He's apparently at retiring age. But this is notable as the major studio outside of Tokyo. This was a vanguard for the rest of Japan, you might say. So it would be a shame if they just shut their doors completely. Let's hope not. But yeah. As far as other stuff, like I said, the film was submitted for Oscar consideration. They did not pick it, sadly. But the manga, I think, won a few awards. The film won a handful, but the manga got some pretty notable. And I believe I read that let's see, what was the organization? Um, geez, I know I saw it here. The manga actually was given a thumbs up by the Japanese Federation of the Deaf. They actually signed off on it. So that's kind of cool. And yeah. And it was nominated for the US edition of the Eisner Awards. So yeah, that's a major comic award there. But anyway, yeah, anyone have any I'm trying to think of any other random bits I had.
Not that I know. I mean, I think we've covered a lot of
Yeah.
the bases. I mean,
Yeah.
it was definitely a film on many levels. I mean, it had some beauty. It definitely very emotional to see, at least for the first time. And I could definitely see it this as a movie if I saw it again, which I probably will eventually again, not at the moment, but
Right.
To take it all in. I mean, it did bring some emotion to me, which I like in a film that even though it brought me some sadness, I mean, you could definitely follow the characters well, through their emotional journey. So it was definitely very human, to say the least. So,
Huh.
All right.
Yes,
One other thing I did want to mention was that the Shoko in the English version is voiced by Lexi Cowden, who, as we mentioned briefly before, actually is deaf. Which I think it's pretty awesome that they gave a voice acting role to someone who's deaf. That's like you wouldn't necessarily expect that.
well, there's a legitimacy given to the character that you would
Right.
never expect.
And like I said, I did see that featurette when I saw it in theaters, and I wish they'd included it on the DVD release. I'm a little annoyed they didn't, but I did see that featurette where they interviewed her, and she was just bowling over with excitement, it's like just really happy to do the role. And I'm like, I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah. But anyway, the
Well,
I guess it's I like said, I think probably one of my favorites, like I said, is the part where the X's fall off. That was a pretty cool moment.
that was.
And there were a lot of little bits.
They didn't just fall off. They turned white, which I was trying to understand the meaning of that. Maybe the fact that that everything just became clear.
Yeah, that's one way to
Well,
put it. They were kind of a bluish purple before, yeah.
I mean, it could just be that the fact that they just died and fell off. For all I know that white is considered in that culture a representation of death, as opposed to white. I mean, as opposed to black in our culture.
And, well, we do still use white lilies for a funeral, yeah, or white callas in particular. But but yeah, it's kind of a innocence and purity, which it definitely still is here. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, more in depth there. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling at this point.
Well, just
Just that the way the sound flooded in, that was really the cool part of that, I thought. The way he was hearing all this different for the first time, really. That was really cool. And like I said, little moments, like the little moment where Yuzuru explained her photography. I thought that was a great moment. The couple moments with his mother, and there were just little bits here and there scattered throughout that just kind of built the thing overall.
Yeah, his little sister right up to him saying, "You were dead."
Right. Oh, and we didn't even mention the grandmother. She had some. She wasn't in it long, but she had some good moments too. And the last little scene she had with Yuzuru was really nice. But yeah.
Yeah, she seemed to have some kind of a presence in Shoku's and her sister's
Mhm.
lives. Even more so, I think, than their mother did, because she might have lived with them or whatnot, um, and
Mhm.
been involved with their lives a little more. So I imagine that in the manga, she had a little bit more character to her.
She did have a little bit more of a role. I cannot recall if it was a greatly increased role, because I mean, again, she does pass early on, so I don't. But I think she had a little more to do.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think we should wrap this up.
Yeah, I think so. Well, why don't we start with our outros? We'll start with you, Jake, actually.
Okay. Well, I'm Kotobuki Jake, and I, of course, in addition to playing on here, I frequently guest on Septum Sin versus the World. I'll let you do the full intro, but basically a channel for uh, celebrating and enjoying physical media, particularly movies and TV shows and anime of all stripes. And and we do have that big video that came out what the end of last week, I guess.
Yep, this is our 100th episode.
Yep. Not to mention the our best of anime movie lists, which are we each put one up, and they are very cool. Lots of stuff there. You will see a silent voice make an appearance or two, as well as you said, I think earlier, some of the other stuff coming up this week, or not this week, this month. Of course, I have my own sporadically updated YouTube channel, Kotobuki Jake. I have an even more sporadically updated Hub Pages account, Kotobuki Jake. And I just watch, read, collect whatever I can get my hands on, and wish I had more time to do it.
Well, before I hand this over to Dave, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I am Septum Sen. I run the YouTube channel Septum Sen versus the World. We are a YouTube channel dedicated to the love and collection of physical media, be it movies or video games or music or whatever, but mostly movies. And of course, we're no stranger to anime, as many people may be kind of sick of our anime focus this summer, but we're going to be getting into other things soon enough. We just had our 100th episode, which celebrates us doing our 100th pickup and 100th new DVD / Blu-ray release video. All in one. Even had participation from Dave from Inside Movies Galore for one section of this huge 3.5 hour monster of an episode. One of the things that we have coming up, of course, as we have taken a break this week, is we do have the second part of the Nintendo themed video game diaries coming up at the end of the week, whereas we will be back to our normally scheduled programming next week. I also am helping with Inside Movies Galore and the other channel for reviews, Delusions of Grandeur, just helping with reviews and even helping with the schedule on our discussions. And our next episode for the Anime August is going to be The Great Film Summer Wars. An amazing film. It has an emotional impact all its own, yet one of a different nature. And I hope to see you all there. And I hand this back to you, Dave.
Awesome. And ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Streggy. I am one of the co-founders of Inside Movies Galore, which originally started out as a movie review slash podcast slash group discussion channel, which now has just become a podcasting channel. And Delusions of Grandeur kind of birthed from that as my own reviews, and I've been working on trying to get back to doing some reviews. But as fate would play it, my health has been under the weather, but I will be getting that into shape and putting out more cool things. In fact, I just started to reach out to more people to interview. So definitely keep a lookout for more interviews and stuff like that. As Brandon said, definitely check out their 100th episode. I contributed a little bit since they contributed to mine. I figured I'd give them a little bit of love from me. So just watch out for, just watch out. I didn't mean to show a little bit of my butt, but it is in there. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for Summer Wars next week and whatever else that our channel may produce. So this was our first episode where we did it on Skype. So hopefully it may or may not have better audio than it did on YouTube. And hopefully we'll be able to share it onto YouTube or other platforms. So like, share, and subscribe. And thank you all for listening. Have a great day, evening, or morning, wherever you are. Thanks for listening. And we'll definitely have some more cool stuff coming up. So say goodnight, everyone.
Good night.
All right, everyone.